New Orleans, Louisiana, summer 1845. The bell of St. Louis Cathedral strikes midnight as the crowd in Jackson Square surges toward the wooden scaffold. Torchlight stains the humid air. At the center, a man stands with his wrists tied behind a post, shirt torn open, back bare to the night. Gabriel. Scars cross his shoulders, but tonight a different mark will be carved there. Not for labor, but for love. Above his head hangs a plank daubed with red letters. For loving a white woman. "Make an example of him," someone shouts. Laughter answers. The smell of rum and fear hangs over the square. A line of militiamen stands below, not to save Gabriel, but to keep the mob from reaching him first. At the platform's edge, fighting two guards, a woman appears, Evangeline Rousseau. Her silk gown is ripped, hair fallen from its pins, gloves smeared where she has clawed at the men restraining her. "Madame, think of your name," one hisses, but she no longer hears. All she sees is the man tied to the post, the man who once placed books into her hands as if they were pieces of his own heart. "Gabriel," she cries, "look at me." Slowly, he lifts his head. Their eyes meet. Hers fierce with terror and defiance, his steady and calm. For a heartbeat, the crowd goes silent. There is only the river beyond the square, the thud of their two hearts, and a question neither can speak. Was loving each other worth this? The whip has not yet fallen. The sentence has not yet been written. Before we witness what this night will demand of them, we must go back to the first collision on a crowded street when two lives brushed together and quietly changed course. And before we step into that beginning, I want to know who is listening tonight. From which city or country are you hearing their tale? Share it in the comments and let their voices reach you across time. Spring of 1844 settled over Louisiana like a velvet curtain drawn low, thick with heat and secrets. New Orleans hummed with the mingled scents of river water, crushed magnolia blossoms, perspiration, and the faint spice drifting from Creole kitchens. Carriages rattled over cobblestones that had seen too many footsteps, too many sins, too many dreams broken or reborn beneath gas lamps flickering in the dusk. On the edge of the French Quarter, where elegant balconies draped with wrought iron lace overlooked the chaos below, stood Maison Rousseau, a white-pillared mansion built on river wealth and sugar profits. Its walls sheltered polished floors, fine tapestries, and conversation spoken in tempered tones. But beneath its grandeur lived a silence heavy enough to bruise. Evangeline Marie Rousseau, 24, the only daughter of Monsieur Laurent Rousseau, walked through those halls with the grace of someone trained since childhood to do so, yet her steps were quiet, almost hesitant, as if she feared disturbing the gilded facade that had become her prison. Her dark hair, often braided simply, contrasted starkly with the pearl tones of her gowns. Her eyes, grey like a storm that refused to break, carried a restlessness unbecoming of a lady of her station. Her mother had died when she was 16. Since then, Evangeline had found her refuge not in soirees or suitors, but in the world of ideas, books, paintings, journals smuggled from France. She filled sketchbooks with portraits of people she saw in the marketplace, dancers, dock workers, children chasing chickens across the street, but she rarely sketched those at her own dinner table. Their faces lacked the honesty she craved. Loneliness wrapped around her like the silk shawls she wore, delicate, elegant, suffocating. Monsieur Rousseau, though strict, was not cruel. He loved his daughter. On his own terms, in the rigid way men of his era believed love should be expressed. He wanted Evangeline married, secured, respectable, preferably to someone whose family crest gleamed as brightly as theirs. Instead, she slipped through his expectations like smoke, refusing proposals with polite firmness, telling him she needed more time, though she never explained to what end. In truth, she feared becoming like the other women in her circle. Beautiful, silent, diminished. She feared being seen only as an ornament in someone else's home. She feared losing the independence she barely possessed, but more than anything, she feared a life where she could not breathe freely, where her mind was a caged bird, fluttering itself to exhaustion behind gilded bars. Across town, beneath far humbler circumstances, lived the man whose path would soon collide with hers. Gabriel. He belonged legally to Monsieur Dubois, owner of the beloved French Quarter bookshop, a haven where ideas from Paris drifted across the Atlantic and nestled themselves on dusty shelves. The shop was cramped, its windows dimmed by age, its aisles narrow and uneven. But to Gabriel, it was cathedral, sanctuary, universe. At 27, he was tall, lean and strong from years of labor, lifting crates, binding volumes, cleaning rooms. His skin held the rich sheen of polished mahogany, and his features bore the delicate imprint of mixed ancestry, long erased by the realities of enslavement. But his eyes, those startling dark eyes, held a quiet intelligence that unsettled those who bothered to notice. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, not out of fear, but out of discipline, an armor crafted carefully over years of understanding the world in which he lived. Words, when mishandled, were weapons that cut the speaker first. He had been taught to read at 12 by Dubois himself, an act both illegal and dangerous. But Dubois, eccentric and stubbornly principled, insisted that literature belonged to all who hungered for it. Gabriel devoured everything he could. Hugo, Voltaire, Dumas, even discarded newspapers left behind by sailors. Sometimes he copied passages by candlelight into scraps of paper he kept hidden beneath a loose floorboard. He wrote, too, quietly, secretly, thoughts about freedom, about the river, about the strange ache he felt whenever he imagined a future that stretched beyond the edges of the quarter. He dreamed in ways a man of his station was not permitted to dream. But dreams, like books, were not chains he could escape. He knew the truth. He belonged to someone else. His body was property, his life a contract inked without his consent. Yet he carried himself with dignity, not defiance, not insolence, but a subdued pride that unsettled overseers and baffled strangers who expected bowed heads. Dubois often referred to him as the best mind in his shop, though never in public. Praise was another thing that could be used against a man like Gabriel. And so Gabriel lived quietly, stepping lightly through a world that never fully saw him, even as he saw everything. Their worlds, hers built of silk and silver, his forged from ink and ash, should never have touched. Yet New Orleans, with all its contradictions, had a way of crossing lines that society insisted were impossible. On the fete-filled afternoon when Evangeline, distracted by the riotous colors of Mardi Gras ribbons, collided with a man balancing a tower of books, the universe shifted. Books scattered. Apologies tumbled. Fingers brushed. Gabriel had looked up in surprise. Evangeline, usually poised, found her breath catch in her throat. For a moment, brief, fragile, unnoticed by the street around them, it felt as though two currents in a vast river had met seamlessly, almost knowingly. She told herself the sensation meant nothing. He told himself it could mean everything he must never hope for. But something had begun, and neither understood how deeply it would root itself until it was far too late. The heat of early June pressed heavily upon the French Quarter, sinking into brick walls and perfumed courtyards. New Orleans moved slower under such weight. Even the street vendors called out their prices with half-hearted vigor, yet inside Maison Rousseau, the tension was sharper, humming with an urgency Evangeline could not escape. Her father had summoned her to the parlor that morning, informing her, without invitation for opinion, that a suitor from Baton Rouge would be calling within the week. A man twice her age, wealthy, widowed, seeking a refined young wife to raise his children and decorate his home. Monsieur Rousseau spoke as if describing a business transaction rather than her life. Evangeline listened, spine straight, face serene, though beneath the silk of her bodice, her heartbeat fluttered with dread. She needed air, space, something not shaped by another person's expectations. By late afternoon, she slipped out of the mansion with her sketchbook under her arm and walked toward the familiar sanctuary of Dubois' bookshop. The streets were alive with the chatter of merchants, the clatter of wagon wheels, the sharp aroma of roasted coffee mixing with river musk. All of it grounded her, reminded her of the world beyond gilded cages. The bell above the bookshop door chimed softly as she entered. Inside, the scent of parchment and ink enveloped her, comforting, stabilizing. Monsieur Dubois was seated behind the counter, polishing his spectacles, but it was not he who drew her attention. It was Gabriel. He stood on a small ladder, sliding leather-bound volumes into their place, the afternoon light catching the lines of his face. He did not immediately notice her. He was lost in concentration, lips moving faintly as if reciting the titles he arranged. His hands, steady, precise, handled each book with a reverence she had rarely seen even among scholars. For a moment, Evangeline simply observed him, feeling a strange fluttering in her chest she refused to name. Then the ladder shifted. Only half an inch, but enough. Gabriel's balance faltered. A stack of books teetered at the edge of the shelf. Without thinking, Evangeline darted forward and grabbed the falling volumes just as Gabriel steadied himself. He froze, startled, turning toward her with wide eyes. "Mademoiselle Evangeline, I didn't realize. Forgive me." "No forgiveness needed," she replied gently, holding the stack against her chest. "I should be the one apologizing. I startled you." He stepped down from the ladder, but not too close. Never too close. Always mindful, always careful. "Thank you," he said quietly, reaching for the books. Their hands brushed again, warmth against warmth. That fleeting contact rippled through her like a shock, unexpected and disorienting. She withdrew her hand a second too late. "Are you here for something particular today?" Gabriel asked, his voice steady but softer than usual. Evangeline hesitated. She had come seeking refuge from her father's plans, but instead she found a kind of solace she hadn't anticipated, one embodied in the quiet presence of the man before her. "I needed clarity," she said at last. "A book might help." "Clarity," Gabriel repeated thoughtfully. He walked toward the back shelf. "There is one you may like. It is about a woman torn between duty and her own mind. Monsieur Dubois says it is too philosophical for most ladies." "And what do you think?" she asked. He stopped, turning to meet her gaze. His eyes were dark, steady, unafraid of truth. "I think you are not like most ladies." The words hung between them, too bold, too honest, too impossible. Evangeline felt her breath catch. Not because of impropriety, but because she sensed he spoke from a place deeper than admiration. When Gabriel handed her the book, their fingers did not touch. He made certain of it, but the careful distance only made the moment feel more intimate. And this exchange, simple, quiet, easily dismissed by the world outside, became the first crack in the walls that separated them, the moment that forced them into seeing what they had tried not to notice. The moment neither could walk back from. The rain arrived without warning. A heavy, southern downpour that turned the French Quarter streets slick and reflective, as if the city were suddenly made of mirrors. Evangeline stepped out of the bookshop holding the volume Gabriel had recommended, but she stopped beneath the awning as the skies opened violently. Thunder rolled above rooftops fashioned in the old Spanish style, echoing through the narrow passages. Inside, Gabriel was shuttering windows, fastening latches with practiced efficiency. Monsieur Dubois had departed early for a dinner engagement, leaving the shop under Gabriel's care. Rain pounded the roof like fists. Evangeline lingered beneath the awning, though she could have called for her carriage. Something held her still. Perhaps the storm, perhaps something else. A gust of wind jolted the door, and Gabriel glanced up. "Mademoiselle," he called over the rain, "you should wait inside. It is not safe out there." She hesitated, only a heartbeat, before stepping back into the dim, warm room. Candlelight trembled along the spines of books. The windows fogged over from humidity, blurring the world outside. Silence thickened between them, not uncomfortable, but charged with something unsaid. "You may stay until the storm passes," Gabriel offered, moving one candle from shelf to counter. His voice was polite, measured, yet there was a subtle tightness beneath it, as if he too felt the shift in the air. "Thank you," she murmured. Water glimmered on her sleeves. Her hair had loosened slightly from the moisture, creating soft curls around her face. He noticed only for an instant, but he forced his gaze downward. She walked toward a small table near the back, running her finger along the wooden surface. "This place always feels different when it rains," she said quietly, "as if time slows." "It does sometimes," Gabriel replied. "The quarter becomes softer, less hurried." "And you?" she asked, turning toward him. "Do you slow down too?" He paused. "I don't know if someone in my position is ever allowed to slow down." The honesty struck her, not sharp, but aching. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You speak as if you are never granted rest." "I rest," he said carefully, "when the work is done, when expectations are satisfied." "Expectations of whom?" He hesitated. Rain battered the shutters. "Everyone," he said finally. "A man like me is expected to move quietly, smoothly, without error, without drawing attention." Evangeline felt her chest tighten. "That sounds like a cage." Gabriel exhaled softly. "It is a life, but not one you chose." "No," he admitted, "not one I chose." She watched him with an intensity she did not bother to hide. "I wish I could do something about that." He froze, not in fear, but in a kind of startled vulnerability. "You should not say such things," he whispered. "Why?" she asked gently. "Because," he swallowed, "not all wishes are safe, and some are impossible." Evangeline stepped closer. The distance between them now was no more than the breadth of a small table. The storm roared, but inside the shop, the world felt unbearably still. "I don't believe in impossible things," she said. Gabriel lifted his gaze to hers, slowly, reluctantly, and something flickered there, something raw and unguarded, something he quickly buried under caution. "You cannot mean that," he said. "I do." Rain hammered the roof. Candlelight trembled, and in that trembling glow, a fragile thread formed, frail, forbidden, but undeniably real. A bond. A beginning neither dared name. The storm did not relent. Instead, it deepened, thunder rolling closer, rain striking the shutters with relentless force. The shop dimmed further as clouds swallowed the last traces of daylight. Candlelight carved gentle gold across Gabriel's cheekbones, illuminating the quiet conflict there. Evangeline sensed it, the tension inside him, not born of fear of her, but of what her presence meant. She moved to the nearest shelf, pretending to scan the titles. "Your world," she said softly, "is full of expectations you never asked for. Mine is the same. Different cages, perhaps, but cages nonetheless." He did not move. She traced the spine of a book. "My father has arranged for me to meet another suitor." Something in Gabriel's jaw tightened. Only slightly, a flicker of emotion too quick to name. "I see," he said. "If that is the path he wishes for you, it must be difficult to refuse." "I've refused 5 already," she replied, letting a small, ironic smile touch her lips. "This one feels heavier, less avoidable." Gabriel lowered his gaze. "Then you must prepare yourself for what is expected." "Expected," she echoed. The word tasted like iron. And what if I don't want what is expected of me? You are a woman of privilege, he said carefully. You may have more choices than someone like me. Choices, she whispered. Do you truly believe that? He lifted his head. Their eyes met across the quiet shop, hers filled with something fierce, aching, his shadowed by understanding that came from lived hardship. I am not free, she continued, voice bending with suppressed frustration. Not in the way the world thinks. My life is planned for me, my husband, my duties, my future children, my role in society, all decided without my consent. Lightning flashed outside, casting a harsh white glow across the room. Gabriel stepped back slightly into the shadows, instinctively avoiding sudden light. His voice came low. Even so, you inhabit a sphere that protects you. A lady's disobedience may tarnish her name, but a slave's disobedience. He paused. It can end a life. Evangeline felt that truth strike deep, but instead of pushing her away from him, it drew her closer, into an understanding she had never been allowed to see. I didn't mean to compare our burdens, she said quietly. Only to say, I recognize something in you, Gabriel, something I see in myself, a hunger for more than this world is willing to give. He looked away, not out of disrespect, but because meeting her gaze felt dangerous. Please, she murmured, taking a small step toward him. Tell me I'm wrong. He closed his eyes briefly. When he spoke, the words trembled with restraint. You are not wrong, mademoiselle, but it is better, for both of us, if we pretend you are. Silence descended again, thicker than the storm. It stretched between them, taut as a drawn string. Then Evangeline said something she had never dared say aloud. When I speak with you, I feel seen. Gabriel's breath caught. No one else listens the way you do, she continued. No one else understands so deeply. You look at me, Gabriel, and I don't feel like an object to be married off. I feel, she struggled for the word, human. His hands tightened at his sides. You should not say these things to me, he whispered again, but this time his voice cracked, revealing longing beneath the caution. Then why do you look at me? She asked softly. As if you feel them too. Gabriel's eyes opened, dark and luminous. His breath shook. Lightning flashed again, and for the first time, Gabriel did not step back. He did not reach for her. He dared not, but he allowed himself to stand fully in her presence, unguarded, unhidden, as though some invisible barrier had finally, silently cracked. A bond forbidden. A bond undeniable. A bond beginning to bloom in the silence between thunder. The storm lingered far longer than either of them expected. Evening bled into night, and the candles burned lower, casting a soft amber glow across the cramped bookshop. The world outside disappeared behind fogged glass, isolating them in a pocket of silence suspended between danger and desire. Evangeline stood near the window, watching droplets race down the panes. She could feel Gabriel's presence a few steps behind her, quiet, steady, carefully restrained. She did not need to turn to know he was watching her, though he would never admit it. You read the world with such intensity, she murmured, her voice barely above the patter of rain, as if every moment means something. Gabriel exhaled slowly, a sound she barely heard. When one's circumstances are unstable, he said, every moment does mean something. She turned halfway toward him. Do you fear instability? I fear consequences, he answered. Especially those I cannot control. His meaning hovered in the air like smoke. And me? She asked, the words trembling though she fought to steady them. Do you fear consequences? Because of me? Gabriel's jaw tightened, then released. Yes. The honesty stunned her, not the content of it, but the courage it required to speak. She stepped closer, no longer willing to hide behind propriety. "You fear what might happen between us." "I fear what will happen," he corrected softly. "If others misread a single glance, a single word, a moment like this." She reached out, fingertips grazing the spine of a book beside him so she did not touch him directly. Yet her nearness set the air between them trembling. "Then tell me," she said, "what is happening now?" His breath caught. She could see it, the subtle rise and fall of his chest, the slight tremor in his fingers. For a man who lived every second with discipline shaped by survival, vulnerability was more intimate than any forbidden touch. "What is happening," Gabriel whispered, "is something we cannot afford to name. But it exists." Lightning cracked above them. Gabriel's eyes flicked toward the window, then back to her. This time he did not hide the truth. "Yes," he breathed, "it exists." Her heart thudded, not with triumph, but with a startled recognition. Something inside her shifted, settling into a place she hadn't known was empty. She stepped closer still, not touching, not crossing the line, but acknowledging it. "You speak as though naming it would endanger us," she said gently. "It would," Gabriel replied. "And yet not naming it." He paused, searching for words that would not betray him. Not naming it does not make it less real. Soft thunder rolled in the distance. They stood close enough for her to hear the subtle break in his breath. Close enough that she could sense the conflict rising within him, shaping his expression into something both yearning and pained. "Say it," Evangeline whispered. Not a command, but a plea. "Just once. For me." Gabriel's eyes closed. "Mademoiselle." His voice nearly broke on the word. "If I say it, I cannot take it back, and once it is spoken aloud, it will haunt every thought I have." "Has it not haunted you already?" she asked. His eyes opened. Dark, vulnerable, unbearably honest. "Yes," he said. "Every day." Silence fell. A silence that was not empty, but full, so full it pressed against their ribs like a second heartbeat. He stepped toward her. Not touching, not daring, but closer. Closer than any slave had a right to be to a white woman, closer than any man had a right to be when the entire world would twist such nearness into a noose. Her breath trembled. "Evangeline," he whispered, her name spoken for the first time without title, without distance, without permission. She felt the sound of it like a touch against her skin. It was too intimate, too dangerous, too beautiful. And she knew, in that moment, something irreversible had happened. They were no longer two strangers orbiting different worlds. They were two souls standing at the precipice of something forbidden, something fragile, fierce, and impossibly alive. Something that could save them, something that could destroy them. The storm outside eased slightly, but inside the shop, the tempest had only just begun. When Gabriel spoke her name, the sound seemed to echo through the narrow aisles of the shop, settling into the worn floorboards and the dim corners like a secret the world was not meant to hear. Evangeline felt her pulse flutter wildly, as if her body recognized some profound truth her mind was still too cautious to claim. "Say it again," she whispered. Gabriel's breath shuddered. "I should not have said it at all." "But you did." Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, every conflicted line, every fracture of longing he fought to contain. "Names hold power," he murmured. "Yours more than most. To speak it is to open a door that cannot be closed." She stepped even closer, so close now that she felt the warmth radiating from him despite the humid air. Her fingers hovered inches from his sleeve. She did not touch him. She knew he would retreat the instant she attempted it, but she let her nearness speak for her. "Perhaps the door was never closed to begin with," she said softly. "Perhaps we've been standing on its threshold for weeks." His eyes flickered. Pain, longing, restraint, all woven together. "Do you want me to be honest?" he asked, voice low. Yes, she breathed. I want the truth. The truth, Gabriel said, swallowing hard, is that I think of our conversations long after you leave. The truth is that when you smile at a passage you love, something inside me, something I've spent my life silencing, begins to stir. The truth is that when you walk into this shop, the world feels bearable. For a moment. Her lips parted, not from shock, but from recognition. I feel the same, she confessed. He closed his eyes as though the words had struck him. Mademoiselle Evangeline, this is dangerous. Only if we let the world see. The world sees everything, he whispered. A glance becomes rumor. Rumor becomes accusation. And an accusation, his voice faded, carrying centuries of brutality behind it. You know what it becomes. She did. The scaffold, the noose, the lash. She reached up, slowly, cautiously, and this time her fingers did touch him. Barely. Only the lightest graze against his forearm. Gabriel inhaled sharply, as if her touch burned and soothed at the same time. Don't pull away, she pleaded. He didn't. For the first time, he allowed himself the smallest movement, a turn of his wrist, enough that their hands almost intertwined. The contact was nothing more than a whisper of skin. Yet it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, breath stolen by the height and the fear of falling. Why are you doing this? He asked, voice raw. Because I am tired, she said, of living a life that feels like it is happening to someone else. Her throat tightened. And because when I am with you, I feel alive. The word trembled between them. Alive. Not proper, not restrained, not perfect, alive. Gabriel looked at her as though he could not bear the intensity of what he felt, and could not bear to look away either. His voice dropped to a trembling whisper. If anyone discovers this, it will be the end of us both. I know, she said. But you still... Yes, she answered before he could finish. I still... The storm began to lighten, the rain softening to a mist that clung to the windows. But the shop held its own weather. Heat rising, tension thickening, the air electric with everything they could not name aloud. Gabriel finally withdrew his hand, not out of rejection, but survival. His voice steadied, though barely. We must be careful. We will be, she promised. No, he said, meeting her gaze with devastating honesty. We must be stronger than we want to be. She nodded, though her heart cracked at the truth. He stepped back a single pace, just enough to remind them of the world waiting outside, the laws, the dangers, the ruthless boundaries that governed their every breath. But even as he stepped back, something between them remained unchanged, unspoken, unbreakable, a forbidden bond, born not of touch but of truth, a bond that would not, could not fade, no matter how fiercely the world demanded it. And as the storm drifted into silence, they both understood. What had begun that night would reshape everything that followed. Their lives, their choices, their fates. Nothing would ever be the same. New Orleans shifted subtly in the weeks that followed, becoming a city of shadows and stolen moments. The French Quarter still pulsed with its usual rhythms, vendors shouting prices at dawn, horse hooves clattering over cobblestones, music drifting from balconies as twilight painted the streets gold. But for Gabriel and Evangeline, the world had narrowed to a fragile thread of glances and brief, breathless exchanges. They avoided anything that might resemble intimacy. They avoided touch. They avoided lingering too long in the same room. But desire, once awakened, refused to retreat into silence. Evangeline visited the bookshop only when others were present, speaking to Gabriel with polite distance. Yet every conversation carried an undercurrent, a careful orchestration of meaning hidden beneath harmless words. Sometimes he would hand her a book, and his fingertips would hover just close enough to hers that she felt the warmth of him. Sometimes she would catch him watching her with an expression too tender to be safe, and sometimes, when neither could resist, they passed in the narrow back hallway, where sunlight filtered through a high window, and for a single heartbeat, the world held its breath as their shoulders brushed. Such moments were harmless to anyone who might observe, but not harmless to them. Not harmless at all. The first sign of danger came quietly. One humid afternoon, Evangeline was exiting the shop with a new volume tucked under her arm when she overheard two women murmuring near the doorway. "Have you seen how often Mademoiselle Rousseau comes here? It is odd, isn't it? And always when that slave boy is working. I wouldn't be surprised if something improper is happening." They tittered behind gloved hands. Improper. The word sliced through her. She forced herself to walk away with measured grace, but the moment she turned the corner, her heart thundered with terror. She had been careless. She had walked too close to the edge. The world had noticed. That evening, as she sat in her parlor pretending to read, her father entered the room. His expression was stern, suspicious. "Evangeline," he said, "I have received troubling remarks about your recent behavior." Her breath hitched. "Concerning what?" "Your visits to the bookshop." His gaze sharpened. "Concerning the slave who works there." She felt the blood drain from her face. "People talk," he continued. "And I must say, your absences from the household and your refusals of suitable suitors are beginning to appear questionable." She swallowed. "I go to read, Father. Nothing more." "I sincerely hope that is the case," he replied. "For your sake, and for the sake of our family name." The tone in his voice carried a warning as heavy as a chain. That night, Evangeline lay awake in her bed, staring at the shadows dancing on the ceiling. She knew she needed to distance herself, for Gabriel's safety as much as her own, but the thought of turning away from him, burying what they'd found, made her chest ache with a grief she had not yet earned, but already feared. Across the quarter, Gabriel slept uneasily in his small quarters behind the shop. Dreams tugged at him, dreams of Evangeline's soft voice, of her hand hovering near his, of dangers creeping like smoke beneath the door. He woke before dawn, heart pounding as if some unseen force had whispered a warning in his ear. The second sign of danger came quickly. 3 days later, as Gabriel unloaded crates behind the shop, Lisette, the jealous housemaid from Maison Rousseau, appeared at the alley entrance. Her eyes glittered with poisonous curiosity. "So," she said, arms crossed, "you and the mademoiselle have become close." Gabriel froze mid-motion. "There is nothing improper," he said carefully. Lisette smirked. "Men like you don't get to decide what is improper. Ladies like her don't speak to slaves unless they want something." She stepped closer. "I've seen how she looks at you." Gabriel's stomach tightened. "You are mistaken." "Am I?" Her smile widened. "Well, I suppose Monsieur Rousseau will decide soon enough." Fear knotted in his gut. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she whispered, "that rumors travel fast, and sometimes a little whisper is all it takes for a man like you to be dealt with." She walked away without another word. Gabriel stood frozen, breath shallow, the truth crashing into him. Their bond had been noticed, and something had shifted in the city's gaze. Something dark, something hungry. That evening, when Evangeline arrived at the shop, she found Gabriel waiting near the back room, anxiety etched into every line of his face. "We cannot continue like this," he said, voice trembling. "People are watching you. They are watching me." Her eyes stung with fear. "I know. If this continues," he swallowed hard, "it will destroy us both." Her throat tightened painfully. "I don't want to lose you. And I don't want to be the reason harm comes to you," he whispered. Their eyes locked. The truth stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. They could not be seen together. They could not speak freely. They could not even look at each other without the world twisting that gaze into a weapon. The crisis had begun, the noose of rumor tightening, the danger swelling, the world preparing to strike. And somewhere deep inside, they both knew. The story they had begun could not stay hidden much longer. Night fell over New Orleans with an unnatural stillness, as if the city itself were holding its breath. The humidity clung to the air, thick enough to taste, and the Mississippi rolled dark and heavy beneath a moon smothered by clouds. Something in the atmosphere felt wrong, off balance, charged with the quiet dread that precedes violence. Evangeline sensed it hours before anything happened. She sat in her bedroom, a lamp burning low beside her, every sound in the house amplified. The creak of the staircase, the murmur of servants, the restless pacing of her father in his study. Rumors had reached him again, louder this time, darker, carrying accusations sharpened into weapons. She had expected another scolding, perhaps confinement to the estate. She had not expected silence. And silence from her father was always the precursor to something catastrophic. Unable to bear the suffocating tension another moment, Evangeline slipped out the back door of the mansion. The night pressed close around her as she walked quickly through the quarter, breath tight, heart pounding. She didn't knock when she reached the bookshop. She simply entered. Gabriel was there, and he was waiting. His expression told her everything. Fear, determination, resignation. "They've formed a mob," he said quietly, voice low and tight. 10, maybe 15 men. They were drinking at the tavern 2 streets over. Lisette stirred them. Your father did nothing to stop it. Evangeline's stomach dropped. A mob? For what reason? Gabriel swallowed. For the same reason mobs always gather around men like me. No. She breathed. No, this can't be happening. It is, he said. They're coming for me. And if they find you here with me, they'll... A sudden crash outside cut him off. Someone had kicked over a barrel in the alley. Laughter followed. Drunken, cruel. They're close, Gabriel whispered. Evangeline grabbed his arm without thinking. We have to run, now. There's a carriage road behind the convent. We can reach it if we hurry. But Gabriel shook his head. If I'm seen fleeing with you, it will only condemn us both faster. You must go. Absolutely not. You must, he insisted, gripping her shoulders with a firmness that bordered on desperation. Evangeline, if they catch us together, they will kill me before sunrise, and they will ruin you. I don't care about reputation. I care. He said sharply. I care because I love you, and I will not let this world rip you apart to punish me. A pounding struck the front door, then another. Wood splintered. Evangeline's breath hitched. Gabriel, go, he whispered. By the back door, I'll draw them away. Before she could protest again, the front door burst inward. Men flooded into the shop. Drunkards, overseers, sons of wealthy planters emboldened by liquor and hatred. They carried ropes, torches, a heavy chain. There he is, one shouted. The Negro, who thinks he can touch a white woman. I never touched her, Gabriel said, stepping forward so their attention locked onto him. She is innocent. Leave her out of this. But the admission, the implicit acknowledgement that there was something to accuse, sent the mob into a frenzy. Where is she? Another man shouted. Where's the whore who lowered herself to him? Evangeline felt a cry rise in her throat, but Gabriel glanced over his shoulder, meeting her eyes with a plea she couldn't refuse. Go. She ducked behind the counter and slipped toward the rear hallway as the men surged forward. The sound of fists slamming into flesh echoed through the shop. Gabriel had allowed them to take him, not because he surrendered, because he was protecting her. Evangeline reached the back door, but the moment she stepped outside, 2 men grabbed her. Well, one sneered. Look who we found hiding. They dragged her back inside, tossing her onto the floor. Her dress tore at the seams. She tried to rise, but a boot pressed her shoulder down. "Don't touch her," Gabriel roared, struggling against the men holding him. Blood streaked his lip. His shirt was ripped. His wrists were already bound. "Look at him," one man jeered, "acting like he owns her. Maybe he thinks she's his property now." Evangeline felt bile rise in her throat. "She's not part of this," Gabriel gasped. "She's innocent." "Don't matter," the leader said. "The city deserves to know what kind of filth goes on behind these walls." He pulled out a rope. "We'll deal with him tonight. String him up at Jackson Square at dawn." Evangeline lunged forward. "No, you animals, you can't just decide a man's fate." The leader struck her across the face. Gabriel snarled, an animalistic, guttural sound that ripped from somewhere deep in his chest. "If you ever touch her again, what will you do?" The man laughed. "Fight us all?" Gabriel tried. God, he tried. He broke free for a breath, landing a blow that sent one attacker crashing into a shelf. Books scattered across the floor, but there were too many. 5 men tackled him at once, forcing him down, beating him until his strength collapsed. Evangeline crawled toward him, tears mixing with blood at the corner of her mouth. Gabriel, look at me!" One of the men grabbed her by the hair, wrenching her back. "You'll watch," he hissed. "You need to see what comes from mixing with—" "Don't!" Gabriel rasped, barely able to lift his head. "Don't hurt her." "Oh, we won't hurt her. Not yet, but you—" He drove a boot into Gabriel's ribs. "You're coming with us." They dragged Gabriel out into the street. "Please," Evangeline screamed. "Please don't take him. Please. He's done nothing." Someone threw a burlap sack over her head to silence her cries, but she heard everything. Gabriel's grunt of pain, the men laughing, the chains rattling, and above it all, the leader's voice. "Hang him at dawn. Let the whole city see." The front door slammed. Footsteps faded. The night swallowed them, and Gabriel, her Gabriel, was gone, taken to the scaffold, taken to die for loving her. Dawn crept over New Orleans with cruel indifference, its pale light brushing the rooftops, the river, the narrow alleys where whispers still lingered from the night before. The sky was washed in gray, as if mourning what had not yet happened, but would. Evangeline ran. Her slippers were soaked through with morning dew, her hair unpinned, her breath ragged as she pushed through the waking streets. The blows she'd taken the night before left bruises swelling beneath her sleeves, but she felt none of them. Her mind held only one image, burning, relentless. Gabriel, dragged away in chains. She reached Jackson Square just as a small crowd gathered near the scaffold. Merchants on their way to set up stalls paused to watch, curiosity mixing with something darker. Some men from the mob staggered about proudly, retelling their version of the night. A few women crossed themselves. A child cried at the sight of the structure. And there, at the foot of the platform, Gabriel knelt, wrists bound behind him, shirt torn, blood dried along his cheek. He was alive, barely, but alive. A guard raised a plank bearing the words, "For transgressing his place." Evangeline pushed through the crowd, ignoring the gasps, the hissed insults, the hands reaching to restrain her. She stumbled onto the first step of the scaffold just as one of the guards moved to block her. "Let her speak," Gabriel rasped. The guard hesitated. "Just long enough." Evangeline dropped to her knees in front of him. "Gabriel," she whispered, tears falling freely. I'm here. His eyes, exhausted, swollen but still steady, met hers. "You shouldn't be. I will not let them take you," she vowed. "I will not let them kill you." "You cannot stop them," he said softly. "This world was built to crush men like me." "Then let it crush me too," she said. And she meant it. Every word. He closed his eyes. The pain that flickered across his face had nothing to do with last night's beating. "Evangeline." "No." She rose suddenly, turning toward the crowd. Her voice broke as she cried out, This man is innocent. If you kill him, then you condemn a heart nobler than any among you. He is educated, kind, compassionate, brilliant, far more of a man than those who hide their cruelty behind law and skin." Gasps erupted. Murmurs rippled like wind. A voice cut through the air. "Enough." Monsieur Rousseau stepped forward, face ashen. "Evangeline, you're destroying yourself." "No, Father," she said, trembling. "I am saving myself. For the first time." He looked at Gabriel, then at the crowd, then at his daughter's face. Her bruises, her torn dress, her wild grief. Something inside him fractured. "Release him," he said quietly. The guards froze. "He is free," Rousseau continued louder, "and he leaves this city today under my protection." Shock rippled through the square. "It ends here," he finished. "No more blood for pride." Slowly, hesitantly, the guards cut Gabriel's bonds. Evangeline caught him as he staggered into her arms. And in the first light of day, with the city watching, they walked away from the scaffold together. They left New Orleans before nightfall. They sailed north. They built a life the world once said they could never have. Not perfect, not easy, but theirs. And that was enough. The story is over, but the pain of that era still resonates. How are you feeling right now? Are you listening to this story alone or with someone? Share your feelings and where you are right now.